You're listening to the Pulled by the Root podcast.
Hello, this is your host, Heidi Marble. I am really looking forward to sharing this episode. It was so wonderful for me to speak with adoptee and author Sara Easterly. We share a few things in common, but obviously being adopted, but we share our love and fascination with butterflies and their transformational power. So we discuss that. We discuss mother longing. We discuss the power of writing, what it is to wordlessly suffer, what it feels like when the spirit meets the bone. We dive into what it is to parent too when you're adopted. And I thought it was wonderful as well because when we Zoomed, Sara had this gorgeous bright backdrop with beautiful happy wallpaper. And here is me dressed in black with my huge black logo. It was such a contrast. It was just a lovely and very special conversation. Enjoy. Hello, everyone. This is Heidi Marble, your host. I am so overjoyed to welcome Sara Easterly, author adoptee, to the Pulled by the Root podcast today. Her book, Searching for Mom, is absolutely brilliant. I listened and I read, so it was really great to go to sleep to Sara's voice every night. And I just felt like it was this bedtime story that's so related to the deepest parts of my soul. It is honestly written, beautifully written. If you have not read it, please do yourself a favor and read this glorious book. I would like to read a bio on Sara so that we know a little bit more about her before we dive into conversation. Sara Easterly is an award-winning author of books and essays. Her memoir, Searching for Mom, won a gold medal in the Illumination Book Awards, was named a winner in the National Indie Excellence Awards, garnered a silver medal in the Reader's Favorite Book Awards, and received an honorable mention in the Writer's Digest Self-Published Book Awards. Among other honors, her children's books, Light, Camera, Fashion, illustrated by Jamie Tamarek, hopefully I said that right, garnered an Oppenheim Toy Portfolio Gold Seal Award and Parents' Choice Silver Honor, among other awards. Sara's essays and articles have been published by Dear Adoption, Feminine Collective, Her View from Home, God Space, Newfield Institute, Psychology Today, Red Letter Christians, Severance Magazine, and the Society of Children's Books and Writers and Illustrators, to name a few. Sara, I need to eat what you're eating. This is so impressive. So welcome. I'm so happy to see you, Sara.
Oh, I'm so happy to see you too. Yeah, after I hear your voice and in your wonderful podcast, and getting to see you is such a treat. So this is great.
Oh, it feels like a treat for me too. I really want to go to the beginning of your story, but before we do that, I prepared for our interview by saying a little prayer, if you will, and I pull a quote. And this is the quote, and I wanted to read it, and then you said I could read a little bit from your book, and I would really like to start with that. And then we can kind of weave in and out of that conversation. So this is the quote that I pulled. Have compassion for everyone you meet, even if they don't want it. What appears to be bad manners, ill temper, or cynicism is always a sign of things no ears have heard, no eyes have seen. You do not know what wars are going on down there, where the spirit meets the bone. Mm-hmm. Miller Williams. Okay, so I got goosebumps reading it.
Me too.
Where the spirit meets the bone. Mm-hmm. When I read this from your book, about a third of the way through, in camouflage removal. Here we go, Sara. And you said, I'm crying like I haven't cried since my Alan heartbreaks from high school. I am hardly hearing the prompting questions about how old I am, who's there, what am I feeling? Through my tears, everything blurs. A water line cuts off the lower half of my vision, a blur of green. What I know are the evergreen trees just outside the window, frame the upper half of my vision. I feel as if I could easily drown in all of this sadness and grief, never come back up for air or life again. I am wading through years and years of accumulated sadness, most of it impossible to put into words. My life's losses in silent, sad images. So many of the images and their tears are centered around my birth mother. talk about a spirit meets the bone moment, Sarah. So after reading that, like, I don't know, it's going to be hard to get through this. I would just like to know where you would like to start after I read that, because it all starts with the birth mother, really. I mean, that's where this eruption to our lives begins. So it is definitely your turn to talk while I Kleenex.
No. Yeah, that was a huge moment for me. And I guess where I don't know where to start with that, because again, it's almost wordless, right? That's why it was hard to even write that. Because sometimes words aren't enough. I mean, it was like a movie. It was just an accumulation. And I think what I'll say to lead with that, and what some background to that, is that I had lost my tears. I didn't cry. I was super, strong facade, and there was no space. There was no room in my family. And as often happens, we just bury everything and toughen up. And my heart had kind of hardened over. And so I had this like incredible stuckness of tears. And when we don't feel our sadness, we don't adapt. And that was one of the wonderful things I learned through my studies of child development, which I was going after to try to be this perfect parent. And here it's like, wow, like the importance of raising our children to experience the wholeness of all of their emotions. And yet I'm not doing that. And that was a moment where, I had kind of started to see that from the brain saw that, my mind saw that, but to actually feel that is a different thing. And that's what happened in that moment, is I was feeling the grief. I just saw a post this week, someone saying, it might've been Anne Heffron saying, it was Anne, that she hears from so many adoptees who say that they feel like they won't stop if they start. And that's how I felt in that moment, is I have so much. Like, it was just so apparent. And, it was this retreat that I was at. And I remember being asked, "Are you finished?" And I'm thinking,
no.
Are you kidding me? Like, that was like that. Like, that was so minute for the amount of buildup in there. It really could have gushed. And I think that's our journey as adoptees in order to get health, is to get comfortable with that grief and the loss. And I don't know if it's ever going to go away. I think, it will get, it's waves, and there are ways to, doesn't mean you have to be wallowing and crying. I was on a mattress, that doesn't have to be all the time, but just accepting that there is incredible loss in adoption, and before adoption, relinquishment, there is incredible loss. No matter how we come to our adoptive families, there's loss. And it's so easy to not, to live our lives kind of dismissing it. And that's what I had done, is just dismissed that it wasn't a big deal. In fact, just kind of as a proof of that, I've always been a writer from even a very young age. I was always writing. And I went through a phase when I decided to be, a career writer and really go after it hard as a children's writer and a young adult writer. And I remember feeling like everything was a little bit flat. All my writing was a little bit emotionally flat. And then I would just kind of groan to myself, like, oh, I wish I had like a harder life. I wish I had something to mine.
Boy, did you ever.
Yeah. And I didn't, that's how disassociated I was from, like, hello, right here. Like, there's a pretty big thing right here. but I was disconnected, and my writing had been flat because I was ignoring something huge and some big feelings that I needed to pay attention to and accept. And that's for emotional health, not just to write stories, but for emotional health, because I was presenting in the world probably a little bit flat as well. One thing that Dr. Gordon Neufeld says is that, you can't feel the joys if you can't feel the sorrows. That's
exactly. And I'm so glad you spoke about the disassociation, because I think that is a survival mechanism for us, the disassociation. And I didn't realize until recently, because I'm coming to all this much later than a lot of adoptees do. But just realizing, my goodness, that was my shield where I could protect my heart. And I didn't realize it until I could look at it objectively, that does make life very flat, because you're just in this numb space of protection behind a wall. But in my case, and many adoptees, and I think you can relate to this based on what I've read, is there wasn't permission granted for those feelings, for those questions. And I know when they bubble up when you're little, it's very hard to, especially if everybody's like, you're chosen and you're part of the family, and you're thinking, but not really. And there's a lot of confusion around it. So I wonder if you could take us back, Sara, because both you and I and a lot of adoptees have a complicated relationship with our adoptive families, in particular our adopted mothers. And I just wonder if you could kind of build your story from the beginning, and we can, go from there.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. So my mom and I were very close. We were very close in many ways, but there was, I was holding back a lot. And I think, for a lot of different reasons. I think, where to begin with that? I mean, mother-daughter relationships in general are complicated. My mom had her own attachment wounds that were activated by the adoption. She had rejection issues from her youth. She had been left behind. And that was one of the beautiful things about writing my book too, is, when you write a memoir, to do it well, you can't, I believe, and what I was taught is you can't be the victim and the perfect character, if you will, and then everyone else is the bad guy. And so I really did have to look at my mom more, a little bit more objectively, and try to get, understand her. And so these are things I'm saying, I just want to qualify, because these are things I didn't realize until I was writing the book. Right. You're living life and not seeing this. So I've got a different better lens now. But she had her own wounds. She had been left behind as a young child in the hospital for a year, and her family moved across the country and left her there. And so she had rejection issues that I never appreciated until later. And so when, being adopted and being, I was in the closed adoption era. It was 1972 when I was adopted, and parents were told, just pretend nothing happened, just go on, if it's okay, just accept them. And that's it. Not a lot of guidance. And it just became this very taboo, uncomfortable conversation between us on all levels. And I was the people-pleasing adoptee. I was always working hard to entertain, to live up to their expectations. My mom had a lot of just subtle pressure, just subtle things that if I picked up on that, she would mention she was a cheerleader, and it's like, at a young age, I decided I had to do that to get her approval, and it's, for me, it was keeping her close. My first mother left, and so I needed to keep my next mother close and do whatever it took. And so I wasn't being my authentic self. And when you're not your authentic self, then you know that inside. And so how do you trust the relationship? Because it's based on a falsehood. She's loving the false me, not the real me. And so it didn't feel like a place of trust. And, a lot of that's just the dynamic of adoption and my mom not knowing. She didn't know, and probably, took advantage is the wrong word because she didn't know, but it was taking advantage. There were ways that I was just being kind of molded like a piece of clay. And it wasn't healthy. And so that there was just underlying tension between us as a result of all of that. And it's just this low grade aggravation because I felt like she was, she's constantly had this agenda for me that wasn't who I was and didn't see the full me. She saw a lot of me. Absolutely. She was a great mom, and she loved me in so many ways. But then the fact that I was adopted was very, she was a very competitive is the wrong word, but prone to jealousy. And so, when I went through adolescence and would say, I hate you, I'm going to go find my real mom, she'd go in her room and shut the door and cry. Horrible, just problematic on a lot of levels. Not willing to talk to me, shunning me, silencing me, creating more rejection. It like triggered my rejection. And then this feeling that I had to take care of her, which is not the parental child role that's appropriate. So there, it was hard. I stuffed all those feelings, I had to stuff it, and I felt guilty. I felt incredible guilt over that, and shame, a lot of shame. And it made me feel like this bad child and what's wrong with me. I'm so mean, all of this, instead of, realizing these are natural, these are natural things of, as adopted, relinquished people to wonder about and to think about. And it was top of mind. Always that longing and wondering about my birth mom was always top of mind. And that's why it did roll off my tongue so easily when I was angered. Because I was fantasizing about running away to my real mom. Not to say that my adopted mom wasn't real, but that was my mentality as an adolescent, pining and having no space for thinking and talking and expressing my feelings and longings for her.
Yeah, Sarah, I think so many people can relate to that. And, I wrote down a couple of things that you said in your book that I thought were so beautiful. Just wordless suffering. Like, whoa, that really got to me. And I think, a lot of us share the ghost kingdom or the fantasy. And I love that when you said you didn't think your mom was Madonna, or, maybe you were starting to realize that, oh gosh, my birth mom may not be Madonna. My birth mom and my like to reign over things. So I just assumed she was a queen. And so this whole fantasy that we build about the grass is greener, and that not knowing, I think it's so important for adoptees to feel comfortable and not have to deal with so much shame and guilt when it comes to discovering our truth. And I wonder if you could speak to us a little bit about that, maybe fast forwarding to the part where it's time for you to surge. And I'm quite sure that wasn't easy given the relationship that you have with your adopted mom. So what can you tell us about that part of your life when you realized your mom wasn't Madonna?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, that was, yeah. That was crushing. It was, I loved Madonna. I still love Madonna. And the age gap, seemed to add up. That was all I needed. And and then Papa Don't Preach came out. And I'm like, that's about me. I was sure of it.
Sarah, I would have bought into it too.
Oh, I know I love comparing adoptee fantasy stories. I just have to say it's so much fun.
It's fun. We need a book. We need you to write a book on that.
That would be so good. Yeah. So maybe I will. But yeah, so that reading that you did, I cleaned myself up after that. There was a bit of a breakdown that followed, and a lot of really hard, some hard things that came of that. But when I picked the pieces back up, I realized she's not going to find me. And I think that was what was so frustrating, is that I kept I had lived my life in this kind of live out loud, be on stage, perform, try to be, the best and excel and stand out, because I just was sure, okay, now it's enough and she'll come find me and she's going to see me. And that was part of what was coming out in that, what you had read. Every time I was up on stage for the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, and, I've had two, I was pregnant, actually. I had one child, pregnant with my next child. I'm a grown woman and I'm up here on the stage at the conference accepting this Member of the Year award, which was wonderful. And I'm not thinking about that. I'm thinking about, my birth mom's got to be out here. She knows it's me. She's finally proud of me. And it was just this lifelong, it had been 36 years of doing that, of just always thinking, okay, is that good enough? Is that enough? She's got to be in this big crowd. And she wasn't. And I was tired. I was so tired. And I realized, okay, I don't have to keep passively waiting. And I think that's something that, being in community with adoptees, I think we tend to do that a lot, is wait for things to happen to us. And that's what I was doing. And so it was really empowering to finally say, no, I'm going to be the one to find her. It's okay. It was right at the beginning of, 23andMe wasn't out yet. And so we hired an investigator. There wasn't a lot of information to be found about her. And so the search began, and it was very fast. They came back with, they had found her. It was very, very fast. And so, I called her. I'm summarizing a bit, but I called her, and she, it was a reunion. It was so many feelings, so complicated, still unfolding. I'm so happy to be in reunion. But it's a getting to know you. We lost 40 years, and it's hard. It's not the same. You don't recover those lost childhood years. They're impossible to get back. And, I don't think you realize that when you're searching. It's not something that's often spoken about, but it's, I feel a sadness every time we speak, because I know it's just, there's just still loss. It's not just been band-aided up. It's still there, but it's wonderful not to have that longing anymore, and not to be always thinking, am I good enough? Is this good enough? Is she seeing? Is she going to find me? So, so much has been put to rest emotionally because I didn't realize how loud that internal chatter was, and that pining and the wondering and the way that contributed to not feeling good enough and that I mattered enough.
Yeah, Sarah, thank you for sharing that. I think the duality of having the adoptive mom and the birth mom, and where your story resonated so deeply with me too, is I struggled with my adopted mom after reunion. It ruined our relationship, but I was the only family member left. So when she became old and sick, it was my job to take care of her. And it was a point where I felt like I had to be punished every time I was with her for the sin of going and finding my birth family and betraying her. And at that point, I didn't realize any of all the books, information existed. I really thought that I was a terrible person who was deserving of this punishment.
Yeah.
And that's not just to say I'm a victim. I was just very confused by it. But when you walk through your mother's death, and she had a long, drawn out illness, and I walked through my mother's death, I remember driving there one day. They had said she would pass within 24 hours, and 27 days later. 27 days.
Whoa.
No eating. I mean, it was brutal, Sarah. So I remember looking at my knuckles on the steering wheel, and I was just like, dear God, help me. Just help me get there. I've got to get there. And at that point, she had stopped speaking. I remember you talking about this wordless communication, right?
Yeah.
And I remember going in there, and she heard my voice, And everything with her, she could barely move. And she looked at me, and I felt like our bond had returned for just a moment. And I just buried my head onto her, and she was barely anything at that point. And I felt the sheets rustling a little. And I was trying to figure out what was wrong. And her hand came up in slow motion. And very slowly, she just wiped my tears. And then she put her hand on my back, and she just gave me a few pats. And I just remembered the grief, Sarah, just like you felt, the grief of all the lost time because of insecurity and all of the things. It just felt so tragic and healing at the same time. And I just wanted her to come back and be whole, and for us to get a reset. But that's not what happened. But I'm so glad that I had that moment. And I went on that tangent because I think, just what you went through, all the airplane rides back and forth. And can you tell us about what that was like for you, for people that haven't read your story?
Absolutely.
Or heard it?
Yeah, I have to take a breath because I'm crying for you right now. I'm so glad that you experienced that. And that you had that, and also sad that it's really tragic. My heart breaks, and I know that pain, because it's like, to get that healing at the end, it's so profound, and also so tragic, because why couldn't that be sooner? But yeah, I mean, my experience was very similar, and I will back up. Sorry. I'm moved by what you shared. But I will back up with my mom. It was very hard. Same thing. When I told her that I wanted to search, right before I did the search, she did not handle it well. It was my mom at her very worst. She was venomous and vicious, and kind of said, "Oh, it's going to be easy for you. It's hard for me." It was it was just really toxic stuff that came out. Part of it was the drugs. She had already had her double lung transplant and was on a huge cocktail of drugs, and they did not help her manage her emotions. But just like the real mom kind of rolled off of my tongue, because it was there and underlying and there for her. She was very, territorial and protective, and I'm your real mom and I'm your mom. And it was kind of all about her. And she really did not think it would be a big deal for me. She thought it was all about her and her loss. She really had a hard time empathizing. And I had to put up some boundaries during that process. And it was horrible timing. She was coming out for a visit to see her grandkids. My children were very young. And she, we knew she had a limited number of years after the lung transplant. It's not a thing that lasts very long. Generally, it's usually, it buys a few more years of time. It wasn't that much for my mom at the end of the day, and it probably did speed up the rejection of her lung transplant. It probably did have an impact on her emotionally. She didn't have a therapist. She didn't have help, outside of her friends and her Bible study and her close, she had a network of close friends. I should say that, but she didn't have a therapist. She didn't have anyone adoption informed helping her make sense of this and normalize it for her, which was a tragedy for both of us and for our relationship. So it was probably about a hard year. And it wasn't long after that she went and, we finally had started to work through it. And she finally started to believe that, she wasn't going to go away. It really did trigger her rejection issues. She thought she was losing me as a daughter. And a lot of that was, and this is in the story, part of what she was feeling was unrelated to my birth mother. It was, I had gone into this women's group that turned out to be operating a lot like a cult. And so that was what she had lost me to, was was that taking up all of my energy. And that was my competing attachment with my mother. It wasn't my birth mother so much, but it was that. And so she was picking up on that and putting it all on losing me to my birth mother. And it really triggered her jealousy and her own rejection issues. So it was complicated, very complicated. And same as what you experienced. I mean, I really felt that I had to be the good adoptee and take care of my mom, put it all behind me and be there for her in her death when she was dying. And it did feel like it went on for a long time. It did not go on as long as for your mom, but it's the death process, being up close to it. I had never been up close to it before. And it was, it reminded me a lot of having birthed my two children. It reminded me a lot of labor, a laboring. It was a laboring towards what's next. And it's not easy. And, my belief is that it's worth the reward, just like childbirth. And there's a purpose. I felt very, being up close to it felt like a purpose, watching it, and multi-purpose, because I really did see part of the purpose and what was healing between my mom and I. For me, and I'm going to tear up because it felt like a gift for me to, and it felt horrible because I didn't want my mom suffering. I really didn't want her suffering, but we had some very profound forgiveness between us. A secret that I had long been keeping was exposed in a very supernatural way that I couldn't explain with my head. It was just like, wow. And she still loved me. It was, and I'll just, probably a bit of a spoiler, but I had an abortion, and my mom had picked up on it. She had a sixth sense. Like I said, there were so many ways she didn't know me and so many she did. And she had a sixth sense at the time of the abortion when I was younger, and had called and wanted to know what was wrong and knew. And I never said, and I had opportunities to say, and I never would say it because she was very pro-life, very strong about adoption is the answer and the only answer. And so it silenced, it made no room for conversation and dialogue. And I really, truly believed that had she known that would be it. I'd be gone, it would be too much. And so that came out as she was dying, and it wasn't too much, to my complete profound surprise. That I really did not expect that. And it was very healing. Oh, sweetie, I love you. And just complete forgiveness. And I needed that. I needed to know that our love was stronger than any of those dark secrets, and any of that shame that I was carrying. And, that was very tied up with adoption and my story as an adoptee. I've since learned that's not uncommon for adoptees either. So, I'm really grateful. It was a gift to have that healing. I'm glad that you had it too. There's just so much to say about it, but it, and super sad. I'm really sad. Sad that it can't be that way, and it couldn't be that way sooner while we were here on Earth together. So I guess it did. What happened next was profound, because my faith had always been something I kept at an arm's distance, and then it became very personal for me. And I can't wait to reunite with my mom, with my adopted mom. I mean, that's going to be a wonderful reunion.
Thank you for sharing. And one of the things I love about you and your book is just your raw honesty and willingness to look at self. Because I think the point that you made about that victim role, we could easily sit back in that. We have enough that it would be justifiable.
Yep.
All adoptees do. But that only gets us so far emotionally. And then it's just this big sadness that we hold. And I think when you talk about the abortion and mothering in your book, and being able to turn toward that and be able to see and forgive yourself. And I think one of the most powerful moments in the book for me was the letter that you wrote. And I don't think we should tell, I think that people need to go read it. I think one of the aids for me, and I'd love to talk to you about this, Sara, is mothering. I did so much fear-based parenting because I never wanted my son to feel abandoned. And when he was 2, I had breast cancer, genetic breast cancer, and almost left him behind with that. And so I just held on so tightly and gripped so tightly. Now he's 24 years old. And I think, gosh, you're the parent of 2 beautiful girls, and I love their names, Violet and Olive. I mean, that's just so precious. But I want to know, we can't say that adoption is an isolated experience. We parent from that place. And I wonder what you can do, being a mother who had to make the decision to not go through pregnancy, and then having 2 beautiful girls and coping with all this in the meantime. What have you learned about motherhood? And I know that's a huge question.
It's a big question. There's so much I could say. In fact, probably a book's worth. And I still, I will say my girls now are 11 and 12, and so we're at the brink of adolescence. And so what I have to say, I've learned so much, as I guess we do as parents, right? Like this, I feel like I have so much information of what's behind me and so much learning. And then I'm sitting in this place where adolescence is when kids separate from us. And I've got 2 daughters, and I know mother-daughter relationships are complicated. And it's like, I don't want a complicated relationship with my daughters. That's not what I want. I want them to be healthy. I want them to be mature and grow. But I also I don't want them to separate. I'm in this place where, no, you can't do that. And so I'm right now at this moment sitting in a place of just, I am still struggling. I mean, it's adoption, it's like you said, it's a lifelong thing here. It doesn't just go away. So that's where memoirs kind of put a time stamp on things, because, when I finished my memoir, and where kind of the memoir leaves off is that I'm learning to embrace motherhood. I had always said I would never have children. I was like, I don't want babies. I'm not interested in children. I don't want to bring, and a lot of it was fear-based. I didn't want to bring children into this. The world felt scary to me. I'm the hypervigilant adoptee. I'm a hypervigilant person. I see the danger everywhere, and the world did not feel safe for children. And it felt like I didn't want to bring children into this dark and scary world. And then I did. And I fell in love with my sister's baby, Kenna, and things opened up. I started thinking, oh, okay, babies aren't so bad. I really actually like them. Let's do this. And so then, I have my 2 babies, fall in crazy love with them early on, and just striving to be the perfect parent, and not wanting them to have any of these holes that I felt as a child, and go, attachment parenting and intensely studying child development and trying to get everything right. And so, that is a large part of my journey with my children early on, was learning that I'm not going to be perfect, and accepting that no mother is perfect, and kind of letting down my expectations of my own mom being perfect, and being there, because what I was missing in that being perfect was I was doing everything book right, but I wasn't connecting with my children there, having these intimate connecting moments with them. And
you're like page 252.
And now I swaddle the baby. I mean, none of the pages say, look your child in the eye, connect to they exactly. Are more informed things now. But so I was missing that connection, that deep need that they have to be seen, just like I had as a child, and still have as the child that I am now, even though I'm an adult, right? So so that was largely my journey for the last several years, was learning to be a more engaged mom, and letting go of this having to get every little thing perfect. And so now that we're kind of at this midway point in their lives, it's about, my process is about letting them go. And I've got to trust the process a bit, trust that it's going to unfold as it's meant to. And they're going to be okay. I had a rough adolescence, and so I'm projecting a lot on them that it's going to be super rough for them. And it's just, motherhood's hard. It's hard. It's hard to begin with, I think. I mean, just being in community with lots of moms. And then when you layer on adoption and all of the different things that come up for us as adoptees, from the separation, the hypervigilance, and the, letting our kids go means that we don't have that, how do I be hypervigilant and let them be themselves? Keep them safe.
I know. Thank you for being so honest. And that's really helpful information, because I think we need the affirmation that we don't have to be perfect and things will be okay. I think as long as those connections are being made, that's really, really important. And you said something too about your memoir, Sarah, and writing and the timestamp. And I'd like to lean into the writing part of this a little bit, because both you and I love our words. Here's my manuscript. Not a book yet. Getting there.
Oh, look at it. It looks great.
Oh my gosh, it's so heavy. It's like a baby.
Yes.
So clearly I had a lot to say, but one of the main drivers to get me through the difficult part of writing my story was my son. And the reason for that is because one day I hope that he will read these pages and better understand his mother and himself, because I put my soul into this book. And the things that I say, he does not have the capacity to understand yet. And that's not diminishing him. It's just life. He doesn't have enough miles on his life yet. Mm-hmm. And I also say in the book, in the chapter, I speak to him directly, that I hope you'll revisit this a couple of times during your life, because it will read differently to you. Yeah. And it is sort of my offering of my truest voice, my most thoughtful voice. You and I talked a lot about, adoptees who are telling their story. And we have been pinned up for so long and not able to speak our truth. And there is nothing that has not been turned over and shown in this book. And can you share with everyone a little bit more about our conversation and some of your thoughts about that, about writing, and how do we protect our soul, and how can that best benefit us without injuring us? Maybe just speak to that a little, if you will.
Absolutely. I think it's really important to be mindful of so many dynamics around it. I think I highly recommend having a support team in place, whether it's a therapist, other adoptees in your community. Highly recommend it, because the process of, for me, shopping my book was very much, here
rejection.
Well, it's rejection central. And it was for me, I had just written this book about kind of coming to a place of healing around the being seen and being noticed, and waiting for my birth mother to find me and to be good enough. And then you finish the book, it's about that. I finish it. And then I'm trying to get an agent and be seen and be noticed and good enough, and super triggering. I mean, and not what I had just written about, getting to peace with that. And then here I'm doing it again in a different way. And to the point where I was on the floor, at one point, just sobbing, oh my, the rejection was so heavy, overwhelming. And feeling like I was worthless and didn't matter. And just, it brought up so much for me that wasn't healthy. And ultimately, even though I have a background in, running the SCBWI and traditional publishing, I worked as an author publicist, doing book tours for New York Times bestselling authors. So I was really invested in traditional publishing. Ultimately, for me, I had to pull the plug on going out. I just had to stop. It wasn't doing good things for me. And it's a lot of all of the creative fields are full of rejection. And so I feel like I'm in a better place now where this is part, but it wasn't, and it was my personal memoir. It was, it wasn't, I've been rejected on other things and other projects, but this was my personal story. And so I didn't go out very wide. I finally just had to do what was true for my emotional health and what was best for me. And so I independently published. So glad that I did, actually. It's been, wonderfully creative for me to have the complete creative control. And to put that rejection aside. So it was good. It was all very good. I'm really glad for the path now that I'm on the other side of that. And it doesn't mean that I'm walking away from traditional publishing, because I may pursue that later. But for that, it was just right what had to happen for my wellness. Then the book's out and it can start all over again. And I see it happen with a lot of other adoptee writers as well. Because, there's so many books out, and so many adoptees are telling our stories, which is great. And so then there can be this kind of same thing. You've got, you've written the book, and then you need to get it out there. People aren't going to just magically find your book. You have to promote it and do all the promotional work. And so that can be very same dynamics. See me, and get in this place of not emotionally healthy. So it's just finding the balance. And, you want your book to touch people. Most, I do. That's why I published it. Right. Otherwise, it would have just been nice to just hand to my kids, because a large part of writing it for me too was so that my kids would understand me. But I also want other adoptees and other adoptive families to read it and understand their adoptees better. And so I do have a desire for it to be out in the world. And so it's a balancing act of staying emotionally healthy and helping the book have some legs or wings, in my case, is a better metaphor. But so helping it get out there. But all of it, publishing is, the whole publishing process can be very activating. And so definitely, I think it's important to know that and to be aware of it. And, so many times just consciousness is what can help us, just the first seeds, so that we know what's going on, what's in front of us, and what these dynamics are.
Well, that's really anchoring. And I think it's kind of like reunion too. I wasn't really prepared to go into it. It's the same whenever we put ourselves out there in a vulnerable way. And what is more vulnerable than sharing all of your secrets, if you will, the underbelly of your being, and then having a publisher read 2 sentences and say, no, thanks. It is very, very triggering, and it's hard to stay anchored in that. And I know a lot of people say to me, just get a thicker skin. I'm like, why don't you get a thinner skin? So I push. I'm a little bit sassy, Sarah. So I'm not looking forward to that process, but having faith that it will end up where it's supposed to, and just trying to hold on to that at some level, and being able to connect with other authors and community to realize that this is a painful path that will have an outcome that it's supposed to have. Maybe that's, overgeneralizing it.
Yeah.
But, I just think that writing is such a powerful way to get our stories out there and to share with each other. It means so much. Your book means so much to me. It's just so beautiful. And Sarah, as we're starting to wrap up, I love the picture on the front of your book with the butterfly. And for me, the butterfly is very important too, because it's so transformative. And when I give public speeches, I often talk about the struggle of the butterfly getting through the hole in the chrysalis, and how if you do something to impact that struggle, the butterfly won't be able to get through the hole and push the fluid into its wings. And so it's like the struggle, it has the capacity to unfold us if we don't bypass it. And I think disassociation, addiction, self-destruction, those are bypasses. We're trying to get out of the struggle. And so how do we get through that struggle, expand, and be able to really use those those wings that are waiting for us. You know, so many of us, like, I think there's a line in your book where you say wings were just kind of clenched on my back. They were just like, and I just wonder what you can say to people that are listening about, you know, maybe we can do some butterfly talk here about why the butterfly means so much to you, and what hope can you give people?
Oh, well, gosh, you said it so well, and it's so true. I mean, it's if we don't, if anything does come in the way, then it doesn't unfold, right? So that, and you just said that so perfectly, Heidi. I love what you said about that. Yeah, I mean, I think, and that's, butterflies are so hopeful, aren't they? I mean, we have them all over our yard right now, and I've just been, it takes me back. I mean, I started the book with my own, you know, butterflies were hugely, you know, significant to me as a young girl. There was one in particular I was following all over my yard. And you know, it was flitting around, and it was hit by a car. And I watched it, and then I was basically a hospice nurse to the butterfly as it was dying for hours. And then that became such a part of my mom's story as well. So it's very entwined for both mother and daughter. I'm wearing my butterfly necklace that I wrote about in the book.
It's beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, I wear it all the time. But I have butterflies, yellow butterflies, in fact, all over my yard right now. They're swallowtails. And it transports me right back to childhood. And I follow them around the yard. I'm always trying to take pictures and videos of them. And it's not possible. And I think that's something that's also kind of interesting. It's like this hugely creatively frustrating thing that I mean, I know there are stock photos, and some people can take photos of the butterflies, but that's not me. But I creatively strive to, and I'm always out there with my phone trying to get them. And it's a funny metaphor, because to me, it's like, you can't capture, some things just can't be captured, you know. I keep trying, but I think that there's something about butterflies, and there's just a magic to it that you can't really capture, you know. And I remember feeling this way with my kids too. Like, sometimes you just can't even capture how cute they are. Like, no photos, you know, no photography class that I took, like nothing would help me get that essence of them that I wanted to capture. And I feel that way about butterflies, that maybe it's not meant to be captured in that way, but I agree, they represent hope and transformation and taking flight. And there's just so much to me that they symbolize, in addition to just being very personal to my mother-daughter journey. They remind me of my mom every time. And usually when I see a butterfly, I know my mom. There's just something that I feel her approval when I see a butterfly. So yeah, there's so much there.
Yeah, I just hope, you know, I still don't use my wings every day. And it's just lovely to know that they're there and that we all have them. And, you know, I just hope for adoptees that I know this episode is going to mean a lot to a lot of people, Sara. And I hope when they think of butterflies or see butterflies, that they see that creature did not come to be without significant transformation and struggle. Yeah. And now it's just floating graceful through the air. And just to have that kind of freedom, isn't that really what we all want? That peace, you know? And just hopefully together in community, we can find a way to validate each other, to listen, to come and to help through the struggle so that we can be trans in some way, shape, or form.
For those adoptees who are writing, I think it's so important to just tell your truth. And I'm so happy to hear that's what you did, Heidi, and that nothing was held back. I think that is so important. I think so many of us get worried if we're going to hurt family and how they'll react. And you're just putting it down. You can change it later. You can dial it back later. You can publish with a pseudonym. There's so many ways around that, but don't let the fear of don't let the fear take you. I mean, it's okay to write and to tell your full story. And it's okay to tone it down, to dial it back later, but just like the important part is to get it out. There's something so like, I just, I had so much, I mentioned that healing that I had when I realized all the emotional energy was going into just wondering about my birth mother. And then having the book out has given me so much too, just having it out of me. It's out of me. It's not good to keep that stuff in. It's like a secret and it gnaws at us. It's not healthy. It's not physically and emotionally healthy. So getting it out of yourself and onto the page. Some people don't do it through words. They do it through other creative outlets. So whatever works for you, but get it out. It's just so important and so freeing to be on the other side when you start to release that all.
Beautiful ending, Sara. I love it. Thank you so much, Sara.